Tabena heard her before he opened the door. Not words, not yet. Just the pitch of it. The specific register of Zara's voice when she had decided something was beneath her, when the patience she performed for the world had run out. And what was underneath it came through the walls of their flat on the 4th floor of a building in Peckham, where the rain had been coming down since morning. He stood at the door with his key in the lock. Then he opened it. Zara was in the living room, arms crossed. The woman was near the kitchen doorway, holding a dishcloth, looking at the floor. I said I want it done before I get back. Zara's voice was the voice she used for people who had disappointed her. Is that a complicated instruction? Is there something about that sentence that requires explanation? The woman said nothing. Her hands tightened on the dishcloth. Because I've asked you 3 times now. 3. And each time you look at me like... Zara, she turned. Tabena was in the hallway. He had not taken off his coat. He had not put down his bag. He was looking at her with the expression he used in courtrooms when a witness had said something that required very careful handling. When did you get back? She said. Now, he said. He looked at the woman near the kitchen doorway. Are you all right? She had looked up when he came in. Her eyes were dark and tired and careful. The eyes of someone who has spent a long time assessing rooms quickly and deciding what is safe. She blinked. The question had arrived without condition, without qualifier. She looked at him and then at the floor. I'm fine, she said. You don't need to, Zara started. I'm talking to her. He said it without heat, just clearly. Zara's jaw tightened. She works here, Tabena. I pay her. She is a person. He finally took off his coat. Standing in our flat holding a dishcloth because you've been speaking to her, in a way that... I pay her debts. Sharp. Final. Do you understand that? I went to my father and asked him to let her work it off here instead of going back to prison. I did that. So yes, I expect what I asked to be done. That doesn't give you the right to speak to her like she's less than you. I'm not speaking to her like she's less than me. I heard you from outside the door. Then you misheard. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the woman. Adan, he said. Have you eaten? Something moved across her face. The specific expression of someone who has been invisible for so long that being seen produces something they do not have a name for. I was about to start dinner, she said. Start with yourself. Whatever you're making, eat first. Zara made a sound that was not quite a word. She is a woman old enough to be your mother, he said. And you will speak to her accordingly. In this house. Every time. He walked to the bedroom. The hallway was quiet behind him. Zara stood with her arms recrossed. Adan stood near the kitchen doorway with the dishcloth in her hands. She looked at the hallway where he had gone. Then she went into the kitchen and began to cook. An hour later, the flat smelled of palm fruit and crayfish and something deeper underneath. The specific smell of a soup that takes time, that cannot be rushed, that requires a person to stay in one place long enough to tend it. Tabena came to the kitchen doorway. Adan was at the stove. Her back was to him. Her right hand moved the wooden spoon in slow circles, and her left hand rested on the counter beside the pot, steady, patient. She had not heard him yet. He watched her for a moment. Something about the way she stood at a stove. The specific economy of her movement, nothing wasted. Everything known, caught at something he could not name. That smells like something my house mother used to make, he said. She turned. She had not startled. She had heard him in the way people hear things when they have spent years, learning to be aware of every room they are in. Your house mother, she said. The woman who ran the home I grew up in. He came further into the kitchen and leaned against the counter on the opposite side, not close enough to intrude, close enough to talk. She made something like this on Sundays. The whole building smelled of it by noon. Adan looked at him for a moment. Then she turned back to the pot. Which home? She said carefully. Orphanage, Southwark. I was there from, as far as I know, from when I was very small. He said it the way he always said it, without drama. The way you say a fact that has been a fact for so long, it has stopped needing to be managed. I never knew my parents. The wooden spoon slowed in the pot. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be. It made me what I am. He looked at the rain on the kitchen window, the London evening pressing its gray face against the glass. I used to wonder sometimes, when I was young, what the story was. Whether they were alive, whether they knew I existed. He paused. You learn to put it somewhere after a while. Adan said nothing. She was looking at the pot, but she was not seeing it. Her hand had stopped moving entirely. What is this? He said, changing the subject the way he always changed subjects, cleanly, without announcement. The soup. She came back. Of aquu, she said. Palm fruit soup, my mother taught me. A small pause. Her mother taught her. It goes back. It goes back, he repeated. He liked that. Can I ask you something? She glanced at him sideways. You can ask. The debt. The situation with Zara's father. He kept his voice the same. The courtroom voice, the one that was not threatening, the one that simply wanted the truth and would wait for it. How did you end up in it, if you don't mind? Her hand moved again, slow circles. My husband, she said. He was sick. Cancer. He was working for Zara's father at the time. He had been working for him for years. Good man, her father. We thought. She said it without bitterness. Just fact. He borrowed the money for the treatment. The condition was that even if he died, the debt stayed. His family would carry it, and he died. He died. She lifted the spoon and tasted the soup, added something from a small dish beside the stove. I didn't know about the full amount until after. He didn't want me to worry. She almost smiled at that. Almost. He never wanted me to worry about anything. Tabena was quiet. He watched her hands at the stove. So the debt became yours, he said. The debt became mine. She set the spoon down on its rest, and I couldn't pay it. I was trying. I was working 3 jobs. I had my son. She stopped. Her hand went still on the counter. You had a son, he asked. The kitchen was very quiet except for the soup. I had a son, she said. He was 3 years old. She did not continue immediately. Tabena did not push. He had learned in courtrooms and in life that the most important things needed a moment of their own before they could be said. What happened? He said. She picked up the spoon again. One day I came home. There were people at my door. Government. I didn't know what. I didn't understand. They had a warrant to search the flat. She shook her head slowly. I had nothing to hide. I let them in. I thought, if I cooperate, if I show I have nothing to hide, it will be fine. It wasn't fine. They found things. Things that were not mine. Things I had never seen before. Her voice was even. The evenness of someone who has told a version of this story to herself so many times that the words have worn smooth. A neighbor, I found out later. Someone had used our flat. I don't know who arranged it. I never knew. She paused. I was sentenced to 22 years. Tabena said nothing. 22 years. He looked at her standing at the stove in a kitchen in Peckham on a rainy evening, and he tried to hold that number against the woman in front of him. And the thing inside him that had no name shifted. And your son, he said. My younger sister took him. She said it simply. The simplicity of something that was decided quickly and at great cost. She was young. She wanted to get married. She couldn't. She couldn't take a 3-year-old boy into a new marriage. She stirred the soup. She took him to an orphanage. In London. She told me it was in Southwark. The spoon stopped. Not dramatically. Tabena did not make a sound. He did not move from the counter where he was leaning, but something in the quality of his stillness changed. The way the air in a room changes when a window is open that has been closed for a very long time. Southwark. I never saw him again, she said. Her voice had not broken. It was still even, still smooth with the smoothness of long telling. But underneath it, the specific weight of a sentence that a person has carried alone for 22 years. He would be 32 now, 33 next April. Tabena's birthday was in April. He was 32 years old. He looked at the rain on the window. What was his name? He said. His voice was completely steady. She looked up at him. Something in his tone. Something in the stillness of him. Tobechukwu, she said. I called him Toby. He nodded once, slowly. That's a good name, he said. He pushed off from the counter. I'll let you finish, he said. It smells incredible. He walked out of the kitchen. He went to the bathroom and closed the door and sat on the edge of the bath and put his hands on his knees and looked at the tile floor. and stayed there for a long time. Southwark, 33 next April, Tobechukwu. He was a barrister. He had spent 10 years learning how to hold enormous things in his hands without dropping them. He had held dying men's testimonies and ruined women's evidence and the specific weight of truth that nobody wanted to hear. And he had held it steadily every time, because that was what the work required. He held this now. He held it, and he breathed, and he thought about what he was going to do next. What he did next was careful and methodical and took 11 days. He did not tell Adan. He did not tell Zara. He went to work every morning and came home every evening, and he watched Adan move through their flat. The way she cooked, the way she folded things, the way she tilted her head slightly when she was listening to something, the way her hands moved when she was thinking. And he catalogued every detail with the specific attention of a man who has spent his whole life looking for something and has just understood that he may have found it. On the third day, he found an excuse to borrow a cup she had drunk from. On the fourth day, he sent it to a laboratory he trusted. On the 11th day, he got the result on his phone. While he was sitting in his car outside their building in the rain, he read it twice. Then he put his phone in his pocket and sat in the car for 20 minutes watching the rain on the windscreen. Positive. He tried to do the right thing quietly. He went to Zara's father's office, not as her fiancé, but as a barrister, because that was the only version of himself that could walk into that office without the meeting becoming something personal before it needed to. The father's name was Alhaji Musa Bello. He had the specific warmth of powerful men who have learned that warmth is cheaper than conflict and more effective than force. He shook Tobena's hand and offered him tea, and smiled with all his teeth. "I want to pay off Adan's debt," Tobena said. "In full, today." The smile stayed. "That is generous of you." "It's not generosity. It's a legal matter." He put a folder on the desk. The terms of the original loan, made to her late husband, were unconscionable under UK law. "I've had them reviewed. If this goes to a solicitor, the entire agreement is challengeable." Alhaji Musa looked at the folder. He did not open it. "You're a clever young man," he said. "I'm asking you to let her go," Tobena said. "Accept a settlement. Let her leave your daughter's employment. Today." Something moved behind the warmth in the older man's eyes. Not anger. Something more considered than anger. "And if I decline, then I file a challenge and we discuss it in front of a judge." He stood. "I'd rather not do that. For Zara's sake." Alhaji Musa was quiet for a moment. He looked at the folder. "She declined," Tobena said. "Adan, when I offered to pay it, she said she didn't want charity." He paused. "Which is why I'm here instead of asking her permission." The older man looked up at him. "Why does it matter to you?" he said. "She's a house girl, She's a person," Tobena said, "who served 22 years for something she didn't do, who lost her child, who came out of prison and walked straight into another form of imprisonment because the law that was supposed to protect her failed her at every point." He picked up his bag. "I know something about systems that fail people. It's why I became a barrister." He walked to the door. "I'll give you 48 hours, sir," he said. "After that I file." He did not wait for an answer. In the 48 hours that followed, nothing was resolved. Alhaji Musa did not call, did not respond. And Tobena, who had spent 11 days being careful and methodical, found that careful and methodical had reached its limit. Because on the evening of the second day, he came home and heard Zara's voice through the door again. He opened it. Same living room, same arms crossed. Different words, but the same weight behind them. The weight of someone who had decided that a person was less than them and was acting accordingly. Adan was near the kitchen doorway again. Her hands were at her sides this time. No dishcloth, just her hands, open, and her face, which had the expression of someone who had run out of the ability to be still about something. "I'm not asking you to like it," Zara was saying. "I'm asking you to do what you're here to do. That's all. It's a simple." "It's not simple." The voice was quiet. But it was not the quiet of someone who had given up. It was the quiet of someone who had decided that this was the moment. "Nothing about this is simple." Zara blinked. It was the first time Adan had spoken back. Directly. without looking at the floor. Excuse me? I said it's simple. Adan's voice was even, but underneath it, something was surfacing. 22 years of something. I have done everything you have asked, every day. Without complaint. I have cooked and cleaned and made myself small in this flat, and I have been grateful, genuinely grateful, because the alternative was a cell, but I will not. Her voice caught slightly and then steadied. I will not be spoken to like I am nothing. I am not nothing. The room was very still. Zazara's expression moved through several things quickly. Surprise, then something that looked briefly like shame. Then the more familiar territory of indignation. I never said you were nothing. You didn't have to say it. Adan looked at her directly. The way a person speaks tells you everything about what they think of you. Zara stopped. She was gathering herself. This is my home. My father arranged this. You are here because of my father's generosity, and Zara. Tobena was in the hallway. She turned her face, not completely this time. He was looking at her with something she had not seen on his face before. Not the courtroom steadiness. Something underneath that. Something that had been building for 11 days and had arrived. Why do you always do this? She said. Her voice had shifted. The indignation moving towards something rawer. Every single time I say anything to her, you appear and you. She stopped. Looked at him. Looked at Adan. Back at him. Something in the geometry of it. Why do you always defend her? Her voice was rising now. You defend her like... You act like she's... She made a sound of frustration. You act like she's your mother or something. The room stopped. Tobena looked at Adan. Adan looked at Tobena. Yes, he said. The word was quiet. Completely quiet. But it filled the flat the way the smell of palm fruit soup had filled it 11 days ago. Completely, reaching every corner. Impossible to pretend you hadn't noticed. Zara stared at him. What? She is. He kept his eyes on Adan. She is my mother. Adan's hand came up to her mouth. Not dramatically, just up. The involuntary motion of a body responding to something the mind has not yet fully processed. Her eyes were on him. They were doing something that had nothing to do with the careful stillness she had walked in this flat for weeks. I had the DNA test done 11 days ago, he said, still looking at Adan, still quiet, positive, 100%. That's Zara's voice had lost its register entirely. That's not. How is that? Her son was taken to an orphanage in Southwark, he said, when he was 3 years old. In April. He paused. I grew up in Southwark. My birthday is in April. I was 3 years old when I arrived. The rain on the windows. The soup. There was soup on the stove, he realized. She had been cooking again. The smell of it was in the flat. The specific smell of a woman who cooked the same things her mother taught her, because it was the last thing that still belonged entirely to her. Toby, Adan said. It was barely a word. He crossed the living room. He crossed it the way he had crossed courtrooms. Steadily, without rushing, because the moment deserved to be approached with the weight it carried. He stopped in front of her. She was looking at his face. The way someone looks at a face when they are trying to find something in it they lost a long time ago. Her eyes moved across his features. His jaw, his eyes, the specific way he held his head, and whatever she found there made something in her face give way that had not given way in 22 years. He opened his arms. She walked into them. She was not a small woman, but in that moment she was. The specific smallness of someone who has been carrying something alone for so long that being allowed to put it down makes them feel the weight of it for the first time. She pressed her face against his shoulder, and she made a sound that was not crying exactly. Something older than crying. Something that had been waiting for a specific place to land for 22 years. And had found it. His arms around her were steady. Behind them, Zara stood in her own living room, with her hands at her sides, and her mouth slightly open, and the specific expression of someone watching two people find each other. And understanding, for the first time, the full dimension of what her family had taken from them both. Your father knew, Tobena said. It was later. Adan was at the kitchen table with tea. Tobena was standing. Zara was in the doorway. She had not left, had not known how to leave. had stood in the living room for 20 minutes and then come to the kitchen doorway and stood there. What do you mean? Zara's voice was careful, now. Something in it that had not been there before. The evidence that was planted in her flat, Tobena said. Her husband, your father's employee, had discovered financial irregularities in your father's company. He was going to report them. He looked at Zara directly. The planted evidence was not random. It was arranged to remove a witness through his wife. Zara shook her head. That's not. I've seen the original debt documents, he said. I've seen the loan terms. I've been a barrister for 10 years, Zara. I know what deliberate looks like when it's dressed up as coincidence. My father is not. He went to my office yesterday, Adan said quietly. Both of them looked at her. She was holding her mug with both hands. Not your father. Someone who works for him. A man I recognized from before. She looked at the table. He told me not to say anything. About my son. About the orphanage, he said. He said there would be consequences. The kitchen was silent. Zara looked at Adan, then at Tobena, then back at Adan. He knew, she said. The word came out very small. He has always known, Tobena said. That is why she ended up here specifically. Not because your father is generous. Because he needed to keep her close enough to watch, and far enough from the truth that she could never find it. Zara sat down. She sat down at the kitchen table the way a person sits when their legs have made a decision that their mind has not caught up with yet. She put both hands flat on the table. She looked at Adan. Adan looked back at her. I didn't know, Zara said. Her voice had lost everything it used to have. The certainty, the register of someone who had decided what things were and was acting accordingly. What was left was just a voice, just a person. I didn't know any of it. I thought. My father said she was a woman who had borrowed money and couldn't pay. I thought I was helping. I thought. She stopped. I know how I spoke to you, she said. I know what I did. I'm not excusing it. I know. Adan said nothing. She looked at her mug. I'm sorry, Zara said. The word landed in the kitchen and stayed there. Tobena looked at Zara for a long moment. Then he looked at his mother. He watched her hands around the mug, the hands that had held a dishcloth in this flat for weeks, that had cooked soup at this stove, that had held a 3-year-old boy's face 22 years ago, in a flat that was searched and dismantled and taken. He looked back at Zara. I need you to pack your things, he said. Zara looked up. Tobena, I need you to pack your things and I need you to go to your father's house tonight. His voice was the courtroom voice. Even, clear. Not cruel, but carrying the specific weight of something that has been decided and will not be undecided. I'm not angry with you for what you didn't know. But I am finished with what you chose to do with what you did know. He paused. You knew she was a person. You knew she was old enough to be your mother. You knew she was working off a debt she didn't choose. And every day in this flat, you chose how to treat her. That choice was yours. Zara's eyes were filling. You don't have to know people's status before you respect them, he said. I learned that in an orphanage, from people who had nothing, who gave anyway. His mother's. The word was still new enough that it did not feel real yet. Still new enough that it felt like something borrowed that he was terrified of losing. And then back at Zara. What you do to people, that's who you are. Zara pressed her lips together. She nodded. She stood up. She walked out of the kitchen without another word. They heard her in the bedroom. The sound of drawers. The sound of a bag. The specific sounds of a life being gathered up from a place it will not return to. Tobena sat down at the kitchen table across from his mother. She was still holding her mug with both hands. She was looking at him the way she had looked at his face in the living room. Still finding things in it. Still mapping the 22 years that were missing from it. I used to hold your face, she said quietly. When you were small, with both hands. Even at 3 years old, you would hold my face with your hands when you wanted me to look at you. She almost smiled. Like you already knew that eye contact was how you made someone understand you were serious. He looked at her. I still do that, he said. In court, she made a sound. It was not quite a laugh and not quite a cry. It was the specific sound of 22 years of distance, collapsing into a kitchen table in Peckham on a rainy London evening. He reached across the table. He put both hands around hers on the mug. They sat like that for a long time. The soup on the stove, the rain on the windows, the sound of Zara's bag wheels crossing the living room floor toward the front door, the click of the latch, and then quiet, just the two of them in the kitchen, just the soup, just the rain. There is a thing that happens in courtrooms sometimes. A truth arrives that is so complete and so final that the room goes quiet in a way that has nothing to do with the judge's instruction. Everyone simply stops. Because something real has just occupied the air, and there is nothing left to argue about. Tobena had felt that silence many times on the other side of it, had been the one who brought the truth that produced it. He had never known what it felt like to be inside it. He knew now. He had spent 32 years not knowing where he came from, not knowing if anyone had chosen to lose him, or had lost him against their will, not knowing if the absence he had grown up inside was indifference or disaster. It was disaster. It was a woman standing at a stove in London, with her hands around a mug of tea, and 22 years of a sentence she did not earn, and a son she had never stopped holding in the only place she had left to hold him. As for Alhaji Musa Bello, Tobena filed the legal challenge the following morning. The financial irregularities the late husband had discovered, the planted evidence, the unconscionable debt terms, assembled into a case file with the specific thoroughness of a man who has spent a decade learning how to make truth unavoidable. The case would take time. Truth usually does, but it would arrive. It always arrives. The most important things in life aren't found by searching for them. They're found by becoming the kind of person they can find. Adan had not brought a cola nut to that flat in Peckham. She had brought palm fruit soup and a dishcloth, and 22 years of a sentence she carried without breaking. She had brought the specific endurance of a woman who lost everything and did not let the losing make her into someone she was not. And her son, the barrister, who grew up in an orphanage in Southwark, who defended people before he understood why, who heard a voice through a door and opened it, had been bringing life to people his whole career without knowing that the life he most needed to find was cooking soup in his own kitchen. Subscribe to African Truth and Tales. We tell stories like this every week. And tell me in the comments, have you ever defended someone before you knew why? Before you understood what they meant to you? Tell me. I read every single one.